My guest today is Rida Rizvi, co-founder of Hadi Learning Organization, a Muslim microschool in the greater Washington, D.C. area. Rida holds degrees in economics and English literature and began her career in the public policy sphere working to implement renewable energy legislation. From there, she moved to a Fortune 200 company where she worked on deploying renewable energy. After the birth of her first child in 2013, she shifted gears to work on community organizing and mobilization in the political realm. In 2014, she also founded a line of faith-based educational toys, and in 2016 served as Community Leader Fellow at the Institute of Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies. It was in 2016 that Al Hadi's founding families met through an informal weekly Muslim Mommy and Me class and then launched their school in 2017. Rida Rizvi, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I just love this story of being this weekly mommy and me class with some other families, and then just having this idea that you should create a school. I'd love to hear what that was like. What was happening at that time that led you to launch Al Hadi?
Sure. Yeah, so I don't have education in my background. I am not a classically trained educator. But I always, when I became a mom, I sort of always had this vision. Oops, I apologize, my phone just went off. I had this vision of what I wanted for my own kiddos, what kind of education I actually wanted for my daughter as she grew up. And when she turned 2 and when I started looking for a pre-K class for her, I couldn't actually find my vision. It just didn't exist. Something that really spoke to every aspect of the child, right? Not just their cognitive side, not just their social side and their physical side, but that emotional side as well, and the spiritual side. That was important for me. I am a practicing Muslim, and that's, just something that I wanted, but it didn't exist. And but I enrolled her in it was a really lovely secular co-op near where we lived. And it was great. It was a great experience, but it was always sort of just missing kind of those two aspects. Um, and then right around that time, a friend of mine who is an educator, a phenomenal educator, she moved back to the area after being away for a few years. And her kiddos were older at that time, so she kind of was out of that early childhood ed, frame of mind. Her kiddos were full time in elementary school, and she launched a mommy and me program. So I after I completed a year with the secular co-op, and then I was like, I'll do this for a while. I'll be at home, with my kiddo. And we did the mommy and me program, and it was pretty much everything that I wanted a class to be, where she was really, alongside the learning about, shapes and colors and, um activities like that, really hands-on fun activities. She was bringing in like the ethos of like what we believed and our values and our faith and our community, just really organically, because what was available to me at the time were, Islamic pre-Ks, but the mode of education was pretty traditional. It was, a lot of like, paper and crayons instead of paper and pencil. It wasn't exactly kind of as holistic and as nurturing as I would like. So, here we go. I see this educator just leading this class of, exactly what I'm looking for. And then I kind of just pitched her. I was like, listen, I'm not working full time anymore. I have all of this free time on my hands. And I came from an industry where the days were long and the hours were long and the pressure was high. So, I was like, I could take something on right now. I'm kind of used to hustling a little bit. And I pitched her, I was like, listen, I'll do the back end stuff if you do the front end stuff. Let's do this. And she was game, she was on board from the get-go, and that was really cool. And together we just kind of launched it with a couple other families. Folks were already part of her mommy and me program, joined in, and that's just how we started.
I love that story. And Rida, you said that it was pretty quick from your pitch to launch. What were some of those startup steps?
Yeah, it was a really, I guess what was nice for us for our team is that it was really clearly demarcated, right? And that's like she was handling, let's call it front office. I was handling back office. And she already had this framework in mind of what and we shared that vision of what education should look like for early childhood ed. And so really the only thing we needed to do was just secure a space. She was launching Her Mommy and Me. She was just kind of renting like from a community center, for a couple hours a week. Um, that was not financially feasible to do like a run a full-time thing at a community center. So we pitched a local mosque. We're like, hey, could we just use your basement? The classrooms you have in your basement that you use for Sunday school. Could we use one or two of those? And they were fine with it. And so yeah, so we went from idea to, open doors in just a matter of a couple of weeks. What we did have to really build out was kind of the back end stuff of a 501(c)(3, recruiting other board members, putting bylaws together, putting policies down on paper. Um, and that was really the only lift. So we were able to do it. We were able to launch pretty quickly.
Amazing. And so, did you start in the beginning as sort of a recognized private school or daycare facility, or was it still sort of this homeschooling kind of co-op feel? I guess what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, so it was definitely like a co-op, and it was a co-op in that, parents were sort of coming in, they were coming into the space, they were helping out. Um, and then it was only sort of as we started kind of growing out of the space that we had to more formalize ourselves as a legal childcare center. And that actually, honestly, that was kind of an alarming way that happened in that we thought, well, we're a co-op, we're a bunch of parents, we didn't really think too much of it because to us it's like, well, we're all here and we're all doing this together. And then it turns out like, oh no, you actually need a license for this sort of thing, we were told. So then, so we kind of went at it, admittedly backwards in that we didn't start out with the license. We didn't start out with this stuff. We always sort of built ourselves, when we needed to step up, when we needed to scaffold up. So that's when we kind of formalized ourselves as a legal childcare. And and then as we slowly grew into kindergarten and then early elementary, that's when we realized like, all right, so this is now technically homeschooling. We have to, so the parents are also really involved and the parents are, some folks are one set of parents might be teaching this subject and another set of parents might be teaching this subject, but technically we're all homeschoolers. So it's, so we actually, from a full scope, we operate under a couple different frameworks from a legal perspective. Um, it's always been something that we've just chewed on, like getting accredited and, just kind of becoming like a full scope school, not just a homeschool co-op. Um, I don't know. It's something we chew on, and there's pros and there's cons to that. So yeah, something we haven't decided on yet.
Yeah, so you have the legal designation as the daycare, and then as you moved into more elementary age students, sort of keeping that as more of a homeschool microschool, and then deciding whether or not you want to be recognized as a private school. But right now, it's more of that homeschool microschool feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell us how it's working now because it seems like you have sort of several different enrollment options for families. Sort of, they can come part-time or in a more of a full-time way. Tell us what that looks like now for the elementary.
Sure. So it's kind of and we wanted to make this as accessible socioeconomically as possible. Because I never really realized how expensive running a school is, especially when you want to, pay your teachers fair rates. And the way that we work at the micro school is a little bit different than the childcare. So the childcare is sort of just run as a childcare where we have, pre-K teachers. But for beyond that, there's a lot of parental involvement. Parents are actually stepping in to teach certain subjects. And We thought the most kind of fair, equitable way to go about it would be to, all right, everyone is sort of just paid a rate, and and you would just essentially use that to knock down your tuition, so that way it's like the more you contribute, the more subjects you pick up, then the more your tuition is essentially lowered. But one thing, there were so many different ways to do it. We wanted to like, we thought long and hard. And for 1 year, we actually did do that where we just offer discounts. Like, all right, if you're going to participate, you're going to contribute this much to the group, then your discount on tuition grows that much. So we've kind of just been toying with different methods as we go each year. There's always tweaks and there's always changes, until we can find that really sweet spot. We're only like 5 or 6 years into it, so we're still just, kind of toying around.
Yeah, so I love that you're sort of experimenting with different ways and models of making this program more accessible to more families. And how many learners are you currently serving in sort of the daycare program and in the elementary program?
Yeah. So we can only have 12 kiddos. So we're in total, our group, it's not a large group. We have 24 learners. But our daycare program is just legally capped at 12. We would love, and it's interesting because we actually are in a residential home. It's a large home. It's the basement of a large home. So it's in total about like, we have about like 2,000 feet to kind of work with. But because of the residential designation, we are just sort of capped, so despite having all of this space, we are capped at 12. So yeah, that's our breakdown. But it's really nice, though, I will say that the way that we teach, because it's a lot of hands-on learning, it's a lot of small group work, having that extra space, in a weird way, it was unfortunate when we learned that we are capped at 12 for the pre-K. But but having actually gone through it and having all this extra space for extra stations and things like that, it kind of works out in the end where the kids are getting a really robust experience.
And then the older kids there's 12 more of those that are sort of also in the space, or they're in a separate area?
They're in a separate area. So they
Yeah.
do have, yeah, they do have their, because again, they can't be there. So what we've done
Okay.
is, and I'm, just being totally straight up, it's actually my in-laws' home. They sort of just
Oh,
like opened up their home to us, which is really nice of them.
oh.
And it's an older couple in this larger home. So they have all this extra space. So then I kind of, when we were growing, beyond pre-K, I just sort of asked them, I was like, listen, you have that really big bedroom upstairs. Are you cool with, your grandkiddos and others and their friends, launching a class up there? So it's a mixed age class. And mixed stages has been so great for us for a number of ways because we can utilize the same classroom and serve, a couple different grades. So this is something that I think we would continue even as we expand into the older elementary is we just like the mixed age model from an operation standpoint and also from an educational standpoint. I think there's a lot of value in having kids of different ages in the same space.
I love that. And so you have this mixed age environment that's really focused on sort of personalized learning, holistic education, targeting each individual learner's needs and interests in this very sort of supportive and nurturing way. What does a typical day look like? I'm thinking about for the school age program.
Hmm. So the co-founder of Hadi, she was actually trained in this really great pedagogy called project-based learning. So project-based learning, it's an inquiry-based, student-led type of education. And so for short, we call it PBL. So a large portion of the day, I mean, almost half of the day actually, is spent on PBL because PBL is really great. And it's also, for anybody out there listening, thinking about like launching something of their own, PBL is really great because from an operational standpoint, if a teacher is trained in how to do it, then they can pull in all the different subjects into one unit. So in that single unit, we actually do leverage PBL in pre-K as well, the same type of learning. You can pull in social studies, you can pull in aspects of science. So you're hitting your standards in multiple different subjects, but in one unit. It's really it's like an intensive way to teach. It's also really fun because again, you're not delineating subject by subject, but that's essentially half of the day. And then the kiddos, will break for lunch and for prayer, for recess. And then and then the parents are coming in at that point because the parents come in and pick up the electives. So the parents are really, so for example, my husband is really big in public speaking. That's just his thing. He's, one of his hobbies, he's got a ton of hobbies, but one of them, he's a comedian. So he feels strongly about having his kiddos have strong public speaking skills. So he runs a regular, that's a workshop. That's a workshop style. That's not a week to week class, but he'll come in and that's one of his contributions. The other thing that that I have a degree in English Lit, like we talked about. And so I would come in for perhaps a quarter or trimester, really whatever my schedule can allow for. So we want to make it as flexible as possible so parents can join in. So you can pick quarter, trimesters, or full year. I said that wrong. Sorry. Quarter, semester, or full year. And you lead what you're interested in. So like I am a big fan of there's a reading program out there that a lot of homeschoolers use. So I'll come in and lead that. My husband's really big on coding. That's something he actually has picked up the entire year. We have another parent. He doesn't have a background in it, but his interest is just in civics. So he's picked that up for the entire year. So different parents come in and they're really kind of thinking through what are my skill sets? Like what can I contribute? Or, what's my interest? Or it could also be as open as like, this is something that I may not have a background in, but I'm ready and prepared to learn it so that I can convey it to the children because I believe my kids need to have these skills. It's completely open. It's up to the parents to choose what they want to do. And then everybody just kind of works together.
So great. So Rida, you said that you launched this program because you couldn't find what you were looking for. And I'm curious, sort of several years in, do you feel like you've created what you were seeking?
Yeah, I think so. Because there was every parent kind of has their vision, right, of what they want for their kiddos. And um, education's interesting, I think, because it's everyone does two, and in my opinion, I think as human beings, we do two things. We either one kind of default back to what we experienced, what we know, or it's like just well, everyone's doing this, my friends are doing this, I'm going to do this too. So it puts the people who are kind of in the middle where like neither choice is something that they want. It puts them in a hard spot. And I don't know, I've always just been a believer in like, hey, there's strength in numbers. If this is something that we need, as a community, hey, let's chip in together, let's all contribute a little bit and then get a return of a lot more. So I think so. Yeah, I do think we came together and we built it.
And in part, you built it for your daughter, who's now getting older and sort of aging out of the elementary program at Al Hadi. And so you're planning sort of your next entrepreneurial venture, which is something that's more geared towards older elementary students. So I wonder if you could share what's happening there.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is that now that they're older and now that, yep, they're kind of graduating out, it's like, okay, the question has been, sure, how do we continue to serve these kids and these families who love this type of education and this style, but also how do we continue to challenge them? Because I feel like kids are so smart today. I don't know if we were like as sharp as they are way back when. And that's been especially because I will say this is kind of where that doubt always comes in is like because I am not an educator. So in canvassing all of the educators that I do know, everyone's kind of just, giving me their list of resources like, hey, well, there's this group out in California doing this, and there's this group out in Florida doing this. And so what's happened is over the years, and kind of as I've been sort of prepping for this expansion, because I kind of knew it was coming, I've been connected to people who are doing similar things in, all over the country. And and I'll talk about the group in Florida, for example. Like, there's a homeschooling mom in Florida who really wanted a an academic, rigorous science STEM class for her kiddos. Same thing. She just couldn't find it. And she has a background in dentistry. So she just launched it, and it's like a 1-day program, but there's labs, there's incorporated labs. And she started out in Florida, and then a friend of hers in Minnesota wanted to bring it there. So then she helped them launch. And so, I've been in touch with her, be like, hey, can we be your third chapter? So now it's not about like kind of building it, but now it's about, I think, bringing in the resources that exist um, to build a program that suits, these kids and that still offers them all of this like hands-on learning and individualized learning. Like we're not gonna hold you back, kiddo. Like if you're ready for the next step, we're here to support you. And hey, kiddo, if you need more support, we're here for that as well. Like we don't want to lose that. We don't want them learning on their own trajectory and on their own timeline and on their own terms. So it's been a really interesting process in just gathering resources to kind of put together a program. And so that's what we're working on right now for the older kiddos. We want to make sure that they're continued to be, that they're challenged and that they have a good amount of socialization as well, because there's a lot of really great, online programs and things like that. So we just want to, and we'll leverage some of those as well, but we do want to keep it balanced, again, just making sure that every aspect of their humanity is served.
Love that. So you have your early childhood program. That's the kind of the licensed daycare with 12 kids. And then you have this sort of mixed age. Is it like K-4, K-5?
K-2.
K-2. Oh, okay. And then now you're going to do this sort of older elementary. That'll be, what do you think? It's sort of third to what?
I mean, as of right now, we're really just planning 3 to 6.
Yeah.
It'd be great if we could expand beyond that, but we're just gonna bite what we can chew right now, right? We just don't want to take too much on. So we're planning for 3 to 6, and then who knows? We'll see kind of what goes after that.
Yeah. And are you going to stay in the sort of residential space? Are you thinking about leasing a space again? I guess how is that thought process going?
So what's kind of cool is that because it's this entire process has been really like community based, is that there's a lot of conversations, a lot of new faces are sort of entering the conversation at this point now that we're kind of looking at older elementary. And we're not tied to anything. So the most recent kind of pivot might be that, yeah, we're starting some conversations about potentially leasing space, larger space, and partnering again with local religious institutions to utilize their space. Um, but again, I think as long as the kiddos are served in the way that they deserve, then if it's more of a partnership with a local religious organization rather than a lease, like rather than a landlord renter relationship, we're open to that as well. We're having some conversations about that as well. I think it's interesting. I know you mentioned the word entrepreneurial. I don't know if I would call myself an entrepreneur just because this has always been just a community effort, right? I'm just a part of a team. I'm just a part of a bunch of people, a bunch of parents who have the same vision. And I don't really care like legally, like who owns it or what the label is or where it lives, as long as the kids are served, right? And I do this as a mom. So yeah.
Amazing. So have you connected with other founders? I mean, you mentioned this person in Florida, and in Minnesota, kind of running these individual programs, but I'm curious if you've connected with other founders, other sort of people who are focused on building what they can't find, whether we call them entrepreneurs or not, who are sort of recognizing that they want more of this unconventional learning environment, this more learner-centered space that also kind of ties in with their overall educational philosophy and personal values. Are you connecting with others who sort of share that vision with you?
Yeah. And so, luckily, Al-Hadi was I will say that Hadi was kind of a pioneer in what it was doing, and that there really wasn't anybody at that time back in, late 2016, early 2017 that was doing this. And, um, because we just sort of had this head start, and because the educators I was working with are so, I mean, they're just amazing educators, we were in a position to just naturally step into kind of a thought leadership role. So we were lucky enough to kind of work with different groups around the country who wanted to start something similarly. So we're really proud of that, that um, there have been a lot of, other groups in different states that have started their own programs, sometimes inspired by us and sometimes actively helped by us, which is great. Um, and then right now, I think now I kind of find myself in that position. So now I'm looking and I'm definitely connecting with a bunch of other people, kind of canvassing everywhere, gathering every resource that we can to to build a program. And what I'm finding is that, and I get it, it makes sense. Now that I've been in the admin role for so many years, I'm finding that what's happening in different places is that people are really just like honing in, like this 1 day STEM program that I mentioned. So people are kind of just like honing in on one aspect or maybe one subject, or even their program might be just offered part-time in the week. Um, and they're just doing what they know, and I really like that. And I think that this pivot, the way, as we sort of develop Aziz Academy more and more, I think that's probably where we're going to end up as well. We're really coalescing around like, hey, what are our strengths, what couldn't we do really, really well? Let's just focus on that, and then we'll kind of bring in the other resources to build around that. So that's what I'm finding. I am in touch with a bunch of other people who are doing really cool stuff all over the place. And yeah, and hopefully together, we're helping each other out.
So I think that's great that you were this pioneer back in 2017. Not that many people that you found doing what you were doing. And was it that you were really focused on more of this sort of unconventional learner-centered model? Because I think you had mentioned earlier that there were other more traditional Islamic schools or sort of smaller private schools, but it was this sort of unconventional learner-centered model. Is that what was the key difference, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think allowing a child to learn in like a play-based way, and this was when we were talking about, pre-K, early childhood ed, that play-based style of learning. So the secular co-op that I had, I think did it so beautifully, right? Where the kids are learning and cognitively they're growing. But they're doing it all through play and through enjoyment, and there's laughter and there's movement in the room. And I really liked that. But what I couldn't find is that with our like my faith values, also incorporated in an equally enjoyable and gentle way. Like that's what I couldn't find. And that's what we built.
And that's what you feel is being accelerated or has been accelerated over the past few years, that there's more people that you're connecting with who recognize that vision of unconventional play-based learner-centered education with that sort of strong faith connection. So that's what you're seeing grow.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's a lot of people doing this now, which is so great because now we can all be resources to one another as we build towards our own individual visions. Yeah.
And what do you think is catalyzing that? Where do you think this interest in these unconventional models, especially with this faith focus, is coming from?
I mean, I think it's just I won't even call it a belief, I'll call it a reality that, one size fits all learning, it's it just doesn't work for everyone. It's one size doesn't fit all. And that's I think the biggest driver that I think a lot of people, and maybe, my one theory I have is that it may have actually been the pandemic, where when so many people were forced into essentially becoming their child's teacher, something that they hadn't considered before, something they'd never done before, but now they don't have a choice. But I think a lot of people came out of that recognizing like, hey, A, this is not so hard. And B, this is actually kind of enjoyable. And I can impart, what I would like to my kids in the manner that I would like. Um, I think we saw a real big boom after that, but that's just a theory. I don't have any data around that or studies or anything like that. But that's just at least what I've picked up anecdotally from talking to a lot of different people.
Interesting. So as we begin to wrap up, Rida, I'd love to know, kind of thinking back now to your launch in 2017 and those sort of early founder days, what advice would you have for other prospective education entrepreneurs or founders working in a community to create some kind of unconventional learning model? What advice would you have for them? And I think about this in terms of you thinking, well, we just were creating this co-op in this basement of a church and later kind of backed into then becoming a licensed daycare. Would you recommend folks be maybe, start off with thinking about licensing a daycare, or do you think this more kind of grassroots model was fine? I guess, what are your sort of reflections and lessons learned over the past few years that you could share?
Um, yeah, I think that's such a good question. I think I would suggest that at least, and this is so funny because I used to work in policy, but for me to say like, oh, I just didn't know the regulations around childcare at the time. Unfortunately, that's actually just the reality is that I just never really looked into it. So I would say, yeah, step one is probably going to be like, hey, look at your local regs. Try, we were in a position where we were, like what we used to say to each other is, we're building this house while we're living in it. So if you can construct the house before you move in, I think that's always a good idea. So yeah, check out your local regs, and develop your 5-year plan accordingly, right? So you're not caught in a position where it's like, oh, okay, I've got to take 2 steps back in order to progress. Um, so that would be one piece of advice, just from our own experience. But also, I think, I'll say it again. I think there's strength in numbers. Just get your idea out there and, talk to people and be welcoming and be open about it. And, if you build it, they will come. I think, that adage is true. So, find the like-minded folks and just build. And, yeah, just keep a pulse on sort of how you want to grow, like logistically and regulatorily speaking, how do you want to grow in your 5 years?
Well, you're sounding an awful lot like a social entrepreneur to me. I'm wondering, especially as you think about this next stage in building out the 3 to 6 program, um, I guess what are sort of your goals for the future? What is sort of your 5-year plan as you think ahead?
And it's that's a tough question, and it's something that my husband and I like constantly discuss, in the car, at the dinner table, like, what are we gonna do like for middle school? And I will say that I think, as parents, we have visions and ideas of what we would like. But if I can adopt your term, as a social entrepreneur, I think there is a different set of, realities and capacity and, you know, kind of institutional knowledge that I know that I just don't have right now. So for me, I think there's a couple different steps. I think it's going to be about trying to see if there is somebody who knows the middle school space and can kind of guide us to achieve this vision, this unique, unconventional vision, while ensuring that we are meeting all the needs of the children. That's going to be, I think, probably step one, trying to get this person on board. Um, and if we can achieve that, then yeah, I think we would like to go all the way up to high school. I think we'd like to include 7 and 8. I grew up in Illinois where 6 is actually part of elementary. I know in Maryland and a bunch of other places around the country.
Same.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, it was always till 6, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So right now our phase one is really kind of get through elementary. And then if we can pull it off, if we can gather the resources and expand up through 8, we would like to do that. That is in the plan, but that is, I think, one of several iterations in case we just, can't gather the resources. So that's my plan, at least right now.
And continuing to be a pioneer. It sounds like that will be this incredible model that others will want to emulate, and you'll be able to show that it's possible. So exciting to see that. So, Rida, what is the best way for my listeners and viewers to sort of follow your progress, connect with you, learn more about Al Hadi and your next program? What is the best way for them to do that?
Oh, so Alhadi is on Instagram. Yeah, so you can definitely follow us there. And Aziz Academy, I think we actually just a few days ago established an Instagram account. So I think social is a really good way to keep pulse on us. And yeah, if anybody ever has any questions or anything like that that they want to, kick my way, yeah, hit me up on Instagram.
So great. Well, best wishes to you, and looking forward to following your progress and seeing you continue to be a pioneer in the unconventional education space. Rida Rizvi, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks again for having me.